So Trump was in New York at 9/11. That's when New Yorkers still liked Donald Trump. He had such a big,
Did we
foot.
though?
Well, some of y'all did. He had a big footprint. He still claimed New York as his home, right? He hadn't moved to Florida, but he knows. My only point is that he knows the magnitude of that disaster and the suffering. So for him to come and say to Karen Bass, like, get those people back in their homes tonight or right away, is disingenuous, and it raises the question about, is there a double standard for Black women in power?
1000% there's a double standard. I mean, one thing that we know from Trump's first administration, the time in between when he was still trying to claim that he was actually elected, and the new time of now when he's the president for the second time, he cannot handle strong Black women. He just, it is just a threat and affront to who he is and how he sees himself functioning in the world. So he has a very hard time dealing with anyone who gives pushback, but in particular to Black women, right? And the people that have come for him during the time when he wasn't president were Black women. I mean, you have Letitia James in New York City or in New York State coming for him. You had, Fonnie Willis down in Atlanta. You had the judge Chuckin. I'm messing up her name, right? He can't handle it. So it's only understandable that he was treating her in an inappropriate, offensive way that's completely unrealistic and unreasonable. The other thing, though, I'll say about the role of the government, what's going to be critical is dealing with the insurance problem, right? Because we have climate change. He's got climate deniers in his administration, but who does recognize climate change? Insurance companies, right? And so as a result of that, they are dropping people's policies because they know it. So their only way to deal with that, it's going to require a government intervention.
Yeah, and the other point you mentioned, Fatima, is about Trump's policies. We saw these raids over the weekend, ICE raids going into sensitive areas, or areas that had previously been deemed sensitive. And you can't help but imagine, like, the workforce in California, the construction workers, the hospitality workers, the infrastructure workers. So many of those workers are Latinos. They're immigrants from various countries, not just Latin American countries, but other countries as well. And so if those folks are afraid to go out the house, afraid to show up at a job site, afraid to apply for a job for fear that they might be deported, that's going to make the rebuilding process even just all the longer and the more complicated and more difficult for families across the region, not just in the Pacific Palisades.